You are listening to Inside the Notes. I'm your host, Erica Block. Here we have the opportunity to listen to the stories that connect our musical family tree. First-hand accounts of performances, musicians, and mentors that shape the way we listen, learn, and teach. On today's episode, we are chatting with author, career coach, and consultant Angela Beeching. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much, Eric. I'm so glad to be doing this.
There's so many things for us to discuss and delve into today, but I want to start off heading right for the meat of it all. I saw a video that you had posted on your website, basically explaining the connection of musicians to their true purpose as the platform for understanding why it's important to do the things that you do. And I would love to just start off talking about that and have you kind of explain to the listeners a little bit about how you help people find that and how important it is to find that.
Yeah. Wow. I just have to say, even though I'm a music career coach and so many clients come to me with very practical things that they want to work on, their promotional materials, they're applying for college teaching jobs, whatever it is, they want to upgrade their website. And they think that this is going to be a kind of logistical, mechanical thing that they're going to work on, that it's all about sort of spiffing up their image or their fake professional kind of veneer that they think, oh, this is the way we're supposed to do it. And that's not the way I work at all. And very quickly we get into real questions about what is it that got them to first fall in love with music?
Mm-hmm.
What's the purpose behind it for them? Like, who's it for? Why do they make music? What's the impact they want to make on an audience? And I think sometimes people are taken aback by that. They feel like, oh, this is kind of personal, or oh, I don't have words for this, or oh, I've never really thought about it. And I think, yeah, the time that we're living in now, more than ever, people really do need to think about this because it's actually the fuel that can keep you going in tough
Right.
times. And I think for some people, the easiest way to get at these kind of self-reflective questions is to, again, think back to the moments in your life when music touched you at your core. And it might be like the first performance that you went to where, it sort of caught your breath and you just like, oh, like you thought, oh, I mean, we've all had those moments, and yet we get into these places, with the grind of the everyday work or the week or the fears that we've got about our future or about our careers, that we lose track of that kind of magic.
Yes. I feel like that's really what this whole podcast is about, is people retelling their magic moments and finding ways of articulating how they felt or where they were. Can you tell us your magic moment as far as falling in love with music, or a concert that you went to that blew your mind?
Oh, I'm sure, like all of your guests and all of your listeners, there have been lots of those moments. But um, I remember that I was in high school at the time. I was in some youth orchestra at the Hart School of Music, and we were doing Shostakovich 5. And I just, I had, there's times when you're playing in this section and then like the brass is coming out like gangbusters and you've got goosebumps all along your arms and you're thinking, I'm having an out of body experience right now. And I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I could feel the hair on the back of my neck. It felt like fate or destiny was
Yeah.
being summoned. And I I don't think I thought about it at the time, but in sort of remembering that sensation, it was like the biggest emotion that I'd ever experienced, and that was really what was happening. Like almost like I didn't know life could be that big at that
Right.
point.
Right. Yeah, the feeling I feel like it's so often it's hard to articulate what that is, but it's very addictive. And once you feel it, then you want to feel it again.
Yeah.
And that I think is the basis. I think a lot of people that orchestral experience when they have that community and the community energy, it creates that magic, and then you want that more. So I feel like that's a very beloved first
Mhm.
experience.
Yeah.
When did you feel like you went through and were a cellist and a professor? When did you find this true calling,
Mm.
and how did you sidestep yourself and kind of reinvent? Because it's an awesome journey, but it takes guts to leave what you're doing and to do something
Yeah.
different.
Yeah. I never ever expected that I would end up doing this kind of work. It wasn't at all what I had in mind. I started out, I guess, sort of typically, I started out as a cellist, and that was the only thing I cared about.
Yep.
I must have been a nightmare as an undergrad because I hated, music theory, music history. If there had been an entrepreneurship class at that time, no one was doing that. But if there had been, I would have, you know, I would have avoided it like the plague. And there's a whole time I was just in love with this idea of, because I especially love chamber music, I wanted to get a university tenure track teaching job and play lots of chamber music. I just thought that would be, everything.
Right.
And I like to tell people that I'm living proof that in life you can sometimes get exactly what you want, only to find out it isn't the way you imagined it.
Yes.
And so I got very burnt out, and it was frightening because I really thought I had first a job like that, like I had dreamed in California, and then one in upstate New York, and it just wasn't. It wasn't for me. There was something that really wasn't the right fit, and I was horribly depressed.
Hmm.
And like your whole sense of identity was wrapped up in that. Like I'm thinking, if I'm not that, if I'm not a cellist, in a university, like what am I? Like, so it was really, really frightening. And it was like hero's journey. You have to get to that all is lost moment
Yeah.
to confront, that your old sense of yourself is like a fantasy, and you have to figure this out. So the cool thing was that while I had been in grad school, I complained to the music department. So this was years before, but I'd complained to the music department because they didn't have any kind of career resource center or office. At that time, nobody had this kind of thing. The university had a career center, but nothing specific for musicians where
Right.
we could find out about booking our own concerts and raising money for projects, all that stuff, how to promote yourself. And so I complained, and the department chair said, write us a proposal. And I didn't even know what a proposal was. I wrote something up. They read it. They said, okay, we're going to make this your teaching assistantship. You get to start this thing. And
Cool.
yeah, like really smart on their part, super cheap labor. I was like
Yeah.
really motivated. I learned a ton. Yeah, I learned a ton, but it was a means to an end. I wanted to find out how to write grants, and I ended up studying in Paris for a couple of years. Like that was all great. I actually liked the work. I remember liking the work because it wasn't just for me. It was something concrete you could create and do and offer for other people, but
Mhm.
it was all just to help me get that kind of job and the life that I had in mind. I just never thought that I would do anything like this. So years later, when I got burnt out with the teaching, I moved back to Boston where I had a bunch of friends and support. And after a while, a job opened up at New England Conservatory running the Career Center. And at that time, very few people had this kind of experience. And because I'd done that kind of work as a grad student, I got the job, and I took it thinking, oh, maybe for a year or two, see what happens.
Yeah.
And I was there for 17 because I so love this work. I
Yeah.
really fascinated with helping people find their path, their calling. and because each musician is so different, you know, the thing that one person gets hung up on is nothing to the next person. So it's really a creative challenge that has taught me so much. I Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, in that genre, I would love to talk about how you interact from one student to the next or one musician to the next, because we're all this complicated mix
Mhm.
of criticism and confidence and ego, and it's all balled up into different proportions.
Yeah.
How do you help the people who think they know who they are, just kind of like what you were speaking about for yourself? Like, I feel like there's a mixture of some students who go out and they don't know. They just want to
Yeah.
do it, but they don't know. Other people, myself and many, were so one tracked of like, I will only be happy if X happens.
Yeah.
And then, of course, it's a lot more challenging. The life is more challenging than just that one thing. So, how do you help people kind of figure out that there's more that they could do?
Hmm.
'Cause especially now when
Yeah.
we're stuck at home and the audition for the symphony isn't happening right now.
Yeah. Well, that's the weird thing about this time. Um, I try to get people to reflect on what they're noticing that they are interested in, what they're
Mhm.
inspired by, because people really need this now. And for me, seeing just the creativity that people have been using when they're doing online performances and the way they're interacting with audiences to get people's responses so that there's that
Yeah.
sense of community and belonging, which is at the heart of all music.
Yep.
And I so for some people I think it's brought them closer to, wow, this does make sense why I do this. um and I think for some people, the what spurs them forward in this is unfortunately the um, trying to keep up with the Joneses, like seeing all
Yeah.
these people cranking stuff out,
Yeah, and they're like,
and then,
"Ah!"
I got to be different. I got to, whatever.
Yeah.
But in the end, you have to start with the people you are connected with and find.
Yeah.
So I've got one client who's been doing porch concerts for neighbors and family members, but also, Zooming with this. So you've got sort of two audiences. And I had another client, they're a duo who created a family chamber music festival.
Oh,
Like for families that have several different, kids and parents, and they did like this amazing job of coaching them and then creating classes like Zoom classes together.
cool.
Yeah, I'm just so like you really see people's creativity coming out. And the other thing is, with everybody moving their teaching practices online,
Mhm.
it has forced all of us to get better at teaching and to figure
Yes.
out what are the advantages of Zoom, because there's some things that actually work better on Zoom, weird, or online. So yeah, I think it's been like a big magnifying glass, for
Mhm.
us. Like we see where our weaknesses are. We see where the fault lines are in our thinking and in our work, and we're so with ourselves all the time that even the least introspective people have had to grapple with some
Right.
core questions.
Absolutely, and like you said, even that feeling of the keeping up with the Joneses, you see how fast people can move and pivot and how
Yeah,
quickly content can come out that looks very good and is very put together, and in, a few short weeks, it went
yeah,
from people having little online interviews to concerts, and it just amped up from there, and we're a few months out, and there's an
yeah.
entire universe of online going on. So it's amazing how much people can change quickly and adapt with the times.
Yeah, although the latency thing, I just
I know.
I keep thinking someday, like just along with the vaccine, we're gonna get the latency thing.
I know.
Like, I mean, wouldn't that be amazing? I
Oh my
just
gosh, and then you could collaborate with your friends all over the world. It would
yeah,
totally change everything if we could
yeah.
get rid of the latency.
Yeah, well, I have a client who, she's a violinist, and she was creating a ground bass improv. Um, she's an early music player, so using ground bass with a group of people who've never improvised before. And I was thinking, if the ground bass is slow enough,
Yeah,
like this could still work.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Wow,
yeah. Ugh.
that's amazing. I know, hopefully. Starting way back when you were starting your years as a cellist,
Mhm.
did you grow up in a musical family, or was this something that came to you and you started on your own?
Well, this was in the public schools. I think in third grade, you could pick an
Mm,
instrument, and I
mhm.
came from a big family. So I have five brothers and sisters. Everybody chose an instrument, but and I'm sort of in the middle. I had to pick something that other people hadn't claimed. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's how it worked.
Did you get put into a teacher, quickly enough, or did you go through until high school and just finally get a teacher that way?
The private teacher that I had was also the high school. Um, No, maybe he was junior high. I can't remember what level he taught, but I mean, I found him pretty quickly, or my family
Mhm.
found him pretty quickly. Yeah, that was a long time ago.
Did you feel like you took the reins on that? I talk a lot with students about when it becomes
Mm,
their thing and not something their parents are wanting them to do.
yeah.
So was your transition into taking the baton and making it your love,
Yeah,
was it
that
easy, or was it something like it took many, many years for you to fall in love with it?
no, I was obsessed kind of from the beginning, and I found a private high school that was arts oriented
Mhm.
that I got a scholarship there. That was all my doing. Like I found the advertisement in the back of the New York Times magazine.
Cool.
Like that's so weird, but yeah. So I went to this high school that was full of dancers mainly at the time, but yeah.
Wow. Did you, have any mentors or teachers that were people that really kind of pushed you to keep going or kind of changed your perspective on what it was like?
I think every teacher I had brought me something different. But yeah, I don't know how to describe that. I think I remember a conversation with Tim Eddy. Um, I studied with him in grad school, and well, I had studied with him a year at New England Conservatory, and then he left,
Mhm.
and then he was teaching at that point at Stony Brook at Manus. And so I had this interesting experience of the way I felt studying with him when I was in one school and then in another.
That's super interesting.
Yeah, and when I auditioned for Manus and Stony Brook, I didn't get into Manus. Like it was just well, this is all kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Um, and so then I was at Stony Brook like for a year, and I remember in a lesson saying to him that when I was at NEC, I felt like I was kind of low man on the totem pole, how there's always that crazy pecking order people think they're in.
Yeah.
And then I was saying, here I'm at Stony Brook and I feel fine. And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, "You were always fine. Like what's the problem?"
Yeah.
So it was one of those moments when you realize the way you thought, like the self-limiting beliefs, that's all the crap that we
Yep.
are just like it's just going on between your ears. And it has nothing to do with the outcome. I remember the players that I knew when I was an undergrad, and I thought for sure they're going to be like superstars. They're going to be like these amazing soloists. No, no, and it's not. Life doesn't unfold in the way you think it does when you're in the middle of any of those schools or
Yes.
programs. And
Yes.
I that's the thing that I used to always talk to students during orientation, and I know they couldn't believe this because it is so real when you're in it, but
Yes.
it's something you have to kind of take on faith.
Yeah, because you're in this insular bubble, which is
Yeah.
bubbled for a reason. They're trying to keep you in this potent situation, but it's so hard to see what life is going to be like on the outside once you get out there. And I think that's really hard for a lot of people when you go out and you don't really know what you're supposed to do next.
I remember a conversation I had with a grad student who worked in our office at New England Conservatory, a singer, very good singer. And it was about the time she was going to graduate. And what she said to me, I remember having a conversation about like what she would have liked to know when she was entering in grad school and versus like, how she felt about things afterwards. And what she told me is she wished that someone had told her it's all going to work out in some way. It's not going to work out the way you think it's going to work out, but it will all work out in some way. And I just think that's true of life. But
Right.
it's the kind of thing that you can't, you don't, it doesn't seem that way when you're 13 or when you're 23 or when you're 33. Like yeah, it's just hard to take that in.
Absolutely, especially when you're blinded with passion for something and you're goal oriented. And I think a lot of these students are so thirsty for whatever it is that they want.
Yeah.
I think that's what, like you were saying, when I was at school too, there was not a lot of career building or information. And we still had desktop computers and the internet was kind of new and it was all just so different, but there wasn't a lot of, and here's some steps you can take when you leave
Right.
to get started. It was like check the union paper and hope that there's an opening in your instrument. Oops, sorry, this year there's been none. And
Yeah.
there was not a lot of what do you do in the meantime or how can you get started in the meantime. And now there is so much, but I almost feel like it's oversaturated. Now they
Mm,
have endless opportunities. They still kind of don't know what to do, and they get out and are a little bit overwhelmed by it all. So I think people like you, there's just such a value into finding ways of helping people steer through their own drama, on top of just how incredibly saturated the whole world is. If you look on Instagram, or any of the social medias, there's so much going on in classical
mhm.
music. Anyone who thinks it's dying clearly hasn't been on
Yeah,
Instagram lately.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
so packed.
Yeah, and I worry about the musicians who aren't kind of self-starters,
Yeah.
and, like, because the examples that we're seeing everywhere are these wonderful projects that people are initiating, and it is kind of what's needed now.
Mhm.
Um, and the only thing that I don't know, sort of console myself with is that I would see students that and younger musicians who you think to yourself they're fixated on being a soloist or getting an orchestral job or whatever. That's the only thing they can see, or a college teaching job. And you think they're never going to start anything on their own. And yet, like, 6 months later, one a person in that exact same situation kind of gets something in the back of their mind, and then you see them just open up and explore because they've fallen in love with an idea that
Right.
leads them in some great place. So I think
Right.
that's the fabulous thing. Even the people that you think are the least entrepreneurial, that don't have that kind of chutzpah to make something happen, they're dark horses. You can, yeah,
Right.
it's a good
Which is
thing.
really exciting because if you've
Yeah,
got an idea and you can't shake it, then it's gonna go if you push it to do so.
yeah.
What was your time in Paris like, after being in the States and then going over there? We always hear from this side of the pond what classical music and the world is like there compared to here and the pros and cons. Did you have experiences that were special to you and different from your experiences on the East Coast?
Well, I just think, if anybody ever has the opportunity, I had two different grants, and I got to spend 2 years there. They weren't
Wow.
consecutive years, but and studying with an amazing teacher. I mean, basically, you don't have to go to class, you don't have to do any of this stuff. So I was hanging out in museums and cafes, and it's just such a beautiful city, and I think that. chance to see life in a very different context was
Yes.
huge. And I got to play a bunch of concerts. I found a pianist, an expat, um, and just yeah, I wouldn't trade those years for anything. And that it was an example of a of that thing that we were just talking about. I had been working in the music library at Stony Brook, where I just got to hear amazing recordings that I would never have stumbled on otherwise. It was just like this benefit of the job. And there was this set of recordings from Harmonia Mundi by this cellist Roland Pudou, and I loved his playing. I was like obsessed with it. And I kept talking about it. My friends were so sick of hearing me talk about this, and they would say, "Shut up about this." They would say, "Why don't you, if you're so in love with this guy's playing, why don't you figure out a way and go study with him and just stop
Yeah.
bugging us?" And I thought, well, how am I supposed to do that? Like write a fan letter? Like, 'cause I already had all these student loans. I was thinking, this is nuts. But a friend of mine who was on a Fulbright from Paris here, he helped me translate the letter because my French was pretty lousy, and and so it set off like this series of events. I ended up taking out a grant. This is crazy. No, taking out a loan in between semesters to go check out what it would be like to study with him. And then a friend of mine, a Dutch cellist, knew about this guy in Germany. So I went over there like for 2 weeks in between semesters, had a whole bunch of lessons,
Wow.
checking out these two teachers because I thought, this was worth it as an investment to me because I didn't know what I was going to do next in my playing and I wanted to figure this out. I was between my master's and my doctorate at that point. And so I went over there, and the teacher in Germany, that was like oil and water. Like, what? That was not the right teacher. And the teacher in Paris was fantastic. I think I had 5 lessons in 10 days or something. And
Wow.
while I was there, I found out about this grant for Americans called the Harriet Hale Woolley Grant. It still exists. So if any of your
Right. Listen up,
listeners,
people.
yeah, but they have very few people. It's only for visual artists and musicians. And I found out about that like within days of like a week of the deadline. I mean, the whole thing was so preposterous. And I thought, I'm not the kind of person who can win something like that. Like I really like all of those uh, imposter syndrome things. And
Right.
I applied and I got it. And I mean, I want to say none of that would have happened if it hadn't been for having friends that were like kicking my butt, like
Yeah.
saying, do something about this. And I had such a great experience that first year that I really wanted to go back. So I applied for the Fulbright. And, it's a lot more competitive. And I didn't get it. And I was demoralized. I was like, "Ugh." And of course, my friends, once again, will apply for next year. I said, why should I bother? Like, they said, apply for next year. So I applied for next year and I improved the grant proposal a lot, but I don't think I had like a whole brand new set of recordings. And so then I get it the next year. And,
Awesome.
and so this is one of those things. I'm the same player, right?
Yeah.
The year before, I thought I was garbage. The year after, it's like, oh, I could win a Fulbright. Like, like, so I
Yes.
just, like, it really stays with you to realize that when we're depending on external validation to decide, are we okay or not? That is just a trap. And
Yes.
and when we're listening to our own self-limiting beliefs, we are just like cutting ourselves off at the knees. Because 2 years in Paris, I got because I had friends who kicked my butt. Like, right? So
Yeah.
I just want to say to listeners, you want to make sure you have some friends who will kick your butt.
It's so good. And you're just nailing it right on the head. This needing the validation from the outside. It's so hard to not do that.
Yeah.
Especially since we're trained to look for and listen for critiques,
Yep.
good and bad. We were
Yeah.
always, listen to me. What do you think about this? And everyone's trying to nitpick to be helpful. And so there is a lot of great that comes from that. But slowly, I think over time, you begin to rely on that as the litmus test for your own value and success,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
where it starts changing its job. And then all
Right.
of a
And
sudden,
the problem with that, I find, is that in a time when we're not playing concerts, people feel like their value as human beings is just nothing.
yeah,
And that's a horrible place to be. So that thing about the commitment to music, the commitment to practice your art, to a lifetime commitment of of working towards something that is much larger than you, much larger than a position. Um, that that this is the only way to keep going during this, because it's not about the next gig or the next rehearsal. If you say, I've made this commitment, I'm in it for the long haul, and I'm in it for something much bigger, much more important than a good review or whatever, a decent recording. Like, because, we're all going to get to the, some place in life where we're going to look back and what was all that for? And it's not
yes.
about how many awards you won, or how many records you made, or some review. Like, that's not going to cut it when you're lying on your deathbed, and we're all going to get there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you talked a little bit in your video too about how things line up when you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And that story you just told was a perfect example of that. Sometimes, just taking that crazy leap or making an attempt at something, and then all of a sudden things shimmy into place. And in the different people I've spoken to, everyone has some sort of story like that. Or, and then I accidentally was at this party, I met this person, and then they said this, and then I got it.
Yeah.
um, it's kind of a hard thing to even articulate or explain, but what do you think about that moment? Like
Yeah.
you had to go out on the limb to take out the loan, and you did it, and you got on the plane and you went, and that was so brave and hard to do. So for people, I feel like people don't even look for those
Yeah.
things, and when they come up across one of those tense moments of, do I do this crazy thing, or do I be responsible and stay at home for the 2 weeks? you know it's like a reversal of the responsibility. It's like you have the
Yeah.
responsibility to jump,
Yeah.
but you feel like you shouldn't. What do you think about that, and how to encourage people to
Yeah.
find their moment?
That's a that First of all, it's tough because there are actually moments every day. There are moments, there are opportunities where we can be more courageous. And if we're honest with ourselves, the stuff that keeps us locked in our comfort zones is the what Stephen Pressfield called resistance, or what Phil Stutz and Barry Michaels called part X. It's that thing like, oh no, you couldn't do that. Like, oh no, you're not someone who could win a grant. It's like, oh, got to be safe, got to be secure, got to, like, ugh. And the deal is, everything good in life that any of us might dream is on the other side of the fear. So you
Right.
have to go through the fear to actually find out what's there. So the thing that I love about this, and I see it in my clients all the time, is when they start acting on this, when they start, just saying, okay, I'm going to be courageous, I'm going to take this step, and then they then they start getting into forward motion. That's that place where it's as if the universe, you know, decides to smile at you, because you're pushing forward through the fear. And And
Yeah.
it's more like you can actually see that there are opportunities out there. If you don't happen to believe that the universe is a positive place and wants good things for you, one way of just thinking of this is when you dare yourself into that place, you're now looking at things differently. So you actually see that the universe is providing this stuff for everybody. And yeah, it's there's why shouldn't you go ahead and push yourself?
Yeah, I love it. I find it incredibly inspiring, and it makes you just want to get started on something. I think if we can find a way to conjure that energy and keep that going during this weird time where everyone's kind of nervously waiting to see what will happen, maybe on the other side we'll have this
Yeah.
burst of energy and creativity.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
what's been helping you with that?
Oh, I've really enjoyed the struggle of trying to figure out how to move this podcast forward, not getting to be face to face. I
Yeah.
spent the whole kind of end of the spring feeling a little bit stalled out, not sure if
Yeah.
it would work and translate over the internet, and just wanting it to have the same kind of click that I have with the guests when we're together.
Hmm.
But of course, after fighting through that, now I'm finding, wait a minute, now I can write people from anywhere, all over the place.
Yeah.
And I'm getting the opportunity this time around to talk with people I wouldn't have been able to talk to, which of course is so exciting. Performing wise, it's always challenging, and I'm sitting with everyone else at the drawing board trying to figure out what we're going to do for a virtual season all year this year.
Yeah.
You definitely have to go through the struggle, I think, to get the next light bulb and then scurry off and try and make it better.
Yeah.
Um, but we're all in it together.
Yeah. And I think the thing, well, I take heart in this that it's so clear that music is really needed and
Hmm.
wanted. Like that, you know, people of course are worried about monetizing this and how the larger ensembles are going to stay intact and presenting series, all of that. But the music itself, there's a huge need, and there's this huge need for people to be able to gather together and
Yes.
create some kind of online community to experience it. I remember watching Josh. Josh,
Joshua Roman?
yes, yes, he he has this wonderful Patreon community and all of that. Um, and he was doing an interesting thing, a box suite every day, and at the end of the week, the all six. And he had a poet, because I think he was in Santa Barbara at the time, a poet who was also in residence there, kind of like marooned in residence because they couldn't fly home. And so she was reading, original work like at the intermission time, and I'm watching this fabulous performance, and the emojis are flying and people are asking all these questions, and I realized all of that real-time reaction to the music is something we don't have in a live
Yeah.
concert, and people get the added benefit of seeing how everybody else is responding. So you really you feel like this sense of belonging because we are
Yeah.
all there.
Right.
And I just thought this was fabulous because he's busy playing. He's not seeing all of this.
Right. It's
You
like heart,
know,
heart, 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 heart.
right?
Yeah. It's so true, and it is so fun because when you're like, "Oh my god, this is awesome, heart," and
Yeah,
then you see the zillions of little hearts, you're like, "It is awesome." And
yeah,
there is something, community and unifying about that, in the way that we all love cheering for a sports team together. People do love listening to
yeah,
music, and it amplifies the energy feeling that you have, and I think as musicians, that's something everyone's really missing,
yeah,
is the energy feeling and the energy between you and your fellow player and your connection with the audience.
yeah,
Um, it's a really important aspect that I think people are hunting for. But like you're saying, putting those kind of concerts together, like Joshua Roman has done, it's awesome, and you really can participate and feel like you're involved.
Yeah. And I've been um, very interested in what else performers can do to engage, to actively engage the audiences. So, as with a violinist client, we were talking about how she was going to introduce this work for like little lunchtime concert she was going to be doing, and for her to talk about what went on in her head, or what um, what kind of images or memories this piece evoked for her, and for her just to say, I'm so curious what comes up for you in listening to this, and I would love it if you write it in the comments. And then that gives everybody the opportunity to think about their own responses and
It's
to
cool.
contribute this. And then she gets like these insights to what it sets off for people, and also material to then have a really interesting conversation with people online.
Absolutely. That's a fabulous idea. And also for herself to think about it from a different perspective. And you might
Yeah.
hear something that you don't normally hear. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So now, as we're heading into the school year, are you finding, are you doing classes for schools and being a guest, or how are you interacting with the students this year?
Well, I am no longer affiliated with an institution, so I am
You're a
free.
free agent.
Yes, I'm a free agent, which I love. But yeah, I have schools that have invited me in to come, and I did a bunch of that for summer festivals. That was also fabulous to see how quickly people, um, and they, how quickly they created, real substantive online festival experiences for students. So I think the thing is there's Zoom fatigue that everybody
Yeah,
is experiencing, and so that whole thing of trying to figure out how do you balance people really getting the individual attention that they deserve and they need, and still have a cohesive group experience.
exactly, exactly. And just how to guide them through this whole thing while they're in their own spaces. I think
Yeah,
it's also really unique. I noticed with my students last quarter, they're all at home in their home world, but they're trying to participate in their music world, which is in a different place. And there's a little bit of rubbing and struggle in between those two universes of what they knew as a younger person and where they were going forward as an adult. So having these moments like those festivals or anything to kind of reattach to the community that you're headed towards,
yeah,
it's really important.
yeah. It is. It's like a clash of identities, you
Yeah,
know, because I get it. Like when you're someone's in their childhood bedroom and
right.
all the stuffed animals are there and your mom is still treating you like you're 12, and yeah,
Yeah, and
that's
you're
tough.
here trying to advance yourself as a young adult. It's a weird physical culture to be in when you're trying
Yeah.
to step outside.
Yeah. One of the things I've been so curious with these larger online meetings that I've been part of, when they ask questions for people just to write in one or two words about how they're feeling in this moment, or one or two words about what they've gained from this period. Like those are small ways that you can help people feel more centered or more focused in where they are in the moment. And actually, just with one of my power group, I do small group coaching, so it's four musicians in a group for 6 months, all working on their own projects. It's great. But in one of these meetings this week, we were talking about using Amy Cuddy's power poses. Do you
Mhm.
know? So
I've heard of them, yeah.
so it's just fabulous exercises, but that you could start lessons. Like that could be a way to start lessons. Same thing, like if you do some deep breathing. And it's just this thing about coming to center. So,
Yes.
so needed.
Yes, that's fabulous. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're very
It's been
welcome.
fantastic. I'm very grateful. Thank you for joining us on Inside the Notes. Be sure to visit InsideTheNotes.com for additional content from our artists and guests. and click subscribe to stay up to date on future interviews. Until next time, this is your host, Erica Block.